Hello, people. Marko here from the Youth Cartel. I'm excited to have a little conversation today with my friend Dan Navarra. Navarra, right?
Navarro, tomato, whatever.
Navarra. I've always said Navarra. I think.
Yeah.
Isn't that right?
Good.
Yeah, good enough. Okay, great. And we're going to talk about the 2022 Youth Pastor Compensation Survey. I always have to think, is that the right words? And we've partnered with Dan. The Youth Cartel has partnered with Dan and Chemistry Staffing on this for a number of years. 5 years, Dan, is that right?
This is our 5th year doing it together.
And man, I think it's the largest survey salary of youth workers that's done. And the data is deep and rich and has been so helpful. I know so many people who have been able to leverage this report to have meaningful conversations with their churches that have resulted in increased wages. And so that's wonderful. We're excited about that. Dan, tell the good people who you are.
Yeah, I'm a church coach with Chemistry Staffing, but I've also got 15 years of youth ministry and pastoral experience. And we help churches find healthy long-term fits. So we're one of those headhunting agencies that is doing good work out there, trying to help churches be healthy. And I do the survey as part of my work with Chemistry Staffing, but it's mostly because I was a youth worker who cares about youth workers.
Yeah, awesome. Now, I do want to encourage you who are watching that this little conversation that Dan and I are going to have will be more informative for you if you read the report first.
Yes,
because we're not going to review everything in it, and there's a lot more information than we're going to cover here. We're not going to go through the whole thing. So pause, go read the report, then come back and finish this. We're just going to highlight a handful of things. So my first question for you, Dan, is when you look at the trends over the last 5 years, as well as the new data from this year. I think we had over 700 responders this year. What surprised you?
So the thing that, if I look at the landscape of 5 years, that has surprised me the most is education and tenure at your church. They're factors that affect your compensation. Youth group size kind of maybe affects compensation. But the two big factors that really truly point to the largest determining factor on salary for youth pastors is things you don't really have control over. It's the size of the church and the size of the budget of the church. And what's crazy for me is there was a huge chunk of youth pastors who we gave a not sure option this year that was new in the data. And there was a large number of youth pastors who were not sure about their church's budget or their church's attendance, more on the budget side. And those youth pastors who were not in the know on their metrics, they did not rank very high in terms of compensation value. And so one of the conclusions we make in the survey this year, and it's not like causal, but they're definitely associated, is you need to learn and understand as a youth pastor the numbers on your own church. You need to get the metrics and understand them. So sitting down with somebody and learning how to do a church budget, really not just a youth budget, but the whole church budget, really beneficial.
Yeah, I thought that was really fascinating as you brought that out in the report. And again, it's not like we can prove like a causal relationship there, but really clearly fascinating that the people who didn't know tended to be, from the data you could see, tended to
undercompensated,
to be undercompensated more clearly. Yeah, really interesting. Yeah. Anything else that particularly, I mean, I was pleasantly surprised to see that even through the pandemic and stuff, that the average has continued to increase.
It has continued to increase, but unlike prior years, it has not kept up with increases that are happening nationwide. And the inflation numbers are almost triple what the youth pastor increases this year. It's like 6% versus 2% or something like that. And so, it's growing, yay, but it's not growing at a rate that's sustainable in our current economy, according to all the other metrics that people use to measure job growth.
And for the record, in case somebody hasn't read the report, the average right now, if I remember right, 54. Is that right?
The big number for youth pastors
Yeah.
is in 2021, it was $50,261.
Oh, it just crossed 50.
Just crossed 50 for the first time
Okay.
this year. It was at 49.9 last year. So it didn't go up very much this year. It's like 1%. 1%.
Okay, got it. Okay, what did you find encouraging as you combed through the data this year?
I think one of the things that we haven't taken a hard look at in the past is part-time and bivocational youth pastors. I spent a good chunk of it of the survey this year looking at that a little closely, and they're actually paid, I mean, for an hourly job pretty well, I think. I mean, the range is like from $16 to $18, depending on, if you're bivocational or if you're just part-time. That's not a bad hourly wage in many parts of the country, I think, for a job. And what's interesting is many of those part-time youth pastors are very well qualified. The number of them that have a bachelor's degree is almost identical to those who are in full-time. Now, there's much less part-time youth pastors with seminary or a master's, but just to say that, they're very well qualified. 20% of all youth pastors are part-time, and we define part-time as less than 30 hours a week.
Right. The thing I'm skeptical about on that is how many of those people, and we don't have data on this, but how many of those people are actually illegally employed? What I mean by that, or being illegally compensated. Because I mean, just anecdotally, over and over and over again, when I talk to part-time youth workers, they're paid a flat fee, and then they're paid a part-time salary,
stipend,
and then expected to do the job, with so many churches convinced wrongly that they're exempt from employment law when they're not.
Yeah, that is I think, a dark side of church work. We used to do this with interns too. Even if you weren't the youth pastor, you're an intern at 20 hours a week, and you're giving you $500 a month, and maybe we're providing housing and stuff like that. But it is a shadow side that, larger churches are dealing with and trying to figure it out right now. My brother's an executive pastor at a large church, and they're trying to figure out, how do we pay our hourly, youth coordinator to go to camp? Because they're on the clock for 24 hours, and they're trying to solve that problem. And there's no creative way around it. If you're an hourly employee, you're an hourly employee, and you're bound by overtime laws.
Right.
And the ministerial exemption is really interesting, because a lot of youth directors and coordinators and interns are not exempt from, they are not part of the ministerial exemption, because they haven't been licensed, commissioned, or ordained. So there's a sticky wicket out there for sure to be careful of.
Right. Yep. What about frustrating stuff? What do you find frustrating as you look at the data this year?
It's not new this year. It's something we've seen every year. We've been measuring it, but there are gaps in wage when it comes to gender that, regardless of what your, complementarian or egalitarian theology says, just human to human, apples to apples, so to speak. There's a large wage gap. It's like 12%, something like that. It's not great news at all. I think it's better than the national average across other industries, but that's, we should be leading the way, is kind of my thought on the ethics of that. And I think one of the, bigger pieces of that that's important to note is the denominations that are out there that are highly egalitarian. Some of them, they put their money where their mouth is on that, and some of them don't. So like, for instance, the Methodist denomination employs the most female youth pastors, but the gender wage gap is markedly higher in that denomination. And so, yay, we're for women in ministry, but we're not paying them the same. And there's a whole credentialing thing, I understand. And there's directors in the Methodist church and pastors, and they're functioning the same. I get there's a lot of nuance to it, but the bottom line is, the church just needs to continue to catch up to the direction the world is moving on treating women and men equally.
I can't remember. Have we seen any movement on that gap?
We have.
Positively or negatively?
When we looked at first-year youth pastors last year, the wage gap was none. They were almost equal, like within $100 or $2, I think it was.
Yeah.
And so it was like, oh, churches that were hiring female youth pastors more recently are paying them fairly compared to their male counterparts in the marketplace. I think where we're struggling is there's a lot of 10 to 15 year female youth pastors who are a product of the quote unquote old guard, and they haven't caught up. Their church hasn't caught up. I think it's even worse among children's pastors, but I don't have any data on that.
Yeah. Great. Okay. We're gonna wrap up. Anything else that you would like to say to the good people watching this? Oh, here's a question.
The only thing
this came up, and you mentioned it when we were talking before we started recording. Somebody asked in a Facebook group yesterday, or Facebook post, and she's a graduate of our coaching program, the woman who asked, how do I bring this up with my bosses? In her case, she's a Methodist youth worker, so that would be the SPRC, the Staff Parish Relations Committee, or a senior pastor, whoever. How do I bring this up? And I have an answer to that, but I'd love to hear your response.
This is why I started the survey, was for my own, to substantiate my own raise, saying, hey, there's people out there, this is what they're making, and this is what I'm making. You should give me a raise. It didn't work. So my first thing is humility is going to be key in this. It's meekness, right? We have great power, but we need to bridle the power. So the tone that we have is super important. You need to know your context and who are your allies and who are not, and how do I talk to them in a way that's respectful. Part of this is you have to know your numbers. You really have to know your numbers. That's, I think, one of the biggest underestimated things. If you don't know what your church's debt is like in your monthly mortgage payment, good luck talking about a raise, because every dollar that goes to a raise doesn't go to the principal in your loan. And those are things that your church administrators, people doing finances are really paying attention to. So, understand your metrics. What has your ministry done to show for new families? That we talk about the kind of the tipping point of compensation in the survey. And the fastest way to get to that tipping point is to add families to your church, not youth to the youth group, but families to the church. That's the quickest way to get to the point where you're a larger church. So that's my answer. What's yours, Marko?
No, I think same as yours. I think the way I responded to that question on Facebook was, it's all about tone. But the tone has to be informed by a knowledge of yourself and a knowledge of the relationship that you have with your pastor or committee or what, finance committee or whatever it is, right? Like, is that a relationship of trust where you can be honest about stuff like this? Then of course, send the survey, have a conversation about it. Is that going to be seen as a threat or as a direct challenge or insubordination or disloyalty? Then you're going to have to take a different tact, right? There's what's the Bible phrasing for this? Wise as a serpent and innocent as a dove, or something like that. Right. So I mean, I think there has to be that caution, and then some real intentionality in the tone that is used with how you bring it up.
And I would advise not to do it casually. It's a good thing to send to your boss or that committee in advance rather than ambushing them with that survey. But I don't know if this is true for me over my time, doing vocational ministry. I have allies. I have my volunteer staff, or maybe an elder who know me really well. And we'll go out to lunch and I'll just say, yeah, did you see the survey? And I'll start talking. And all of a sudden now I'm venting about my frustration. Well, that casual lunch can have ramifications down the road if we're not careful. So it might be safer to have these conversations in, annual reviews, like asking for a meeting, right? Setting it up more professionally.
That's good.
Yeah, that's just a piece of advice to carry.
Awesome. Dan, thanks for partnering with us on this. Really, we're partnering with you probably more than you're partnering with us, but we're glad that the cartel's been able to be a part of this for a number of years. I really do think it's an important service that we're offering youth workers. Youth workers, we love you. We hope that this salary survey is helpful, and we'll continue to provide it for you.
Thanks so much.